So in this video, I'm going to teach you how to become an internet service provider. Let me give you some context. A number of months back, I moved the family to Kenya, got a new job, new opportunity, great place, except for the internet. In the community that we lived in, there were a number of homes, and the plan was to rent some business-grade internet and distribute it across those homes where people could subscribe to as much or as little bandwidth as they wanted to. So in this tutorial, I'm going to teach you how I became an internet service provider and some of the steps that I took to get this plan into action. Enjoy. So step one, the equipment. And this is the equipment that I settled on to help me make my network. Firstly, you need a ton of Cat 5, Cat 6 cable. This is like industrial nuclear strength external cable that I use to wire the homes and also the base stations. The base stations had these devices on top, NanoStation Loco M5s, and they transmitted a 5 GHz wireless signal to the homes, which also have these on top. Once we've configured those, you then need something to distribute the wireless network within the homes, and that's where a bog standard simple wireless router could come from. And this is a TP-Link. You can use anything that you would like to use, and this created the wireless networks in the homes so that each user could create their network. And then finally you needed something to manage all of these, and I settled on something called a MikroTik router board. This is a particularly small one but very configurable, enables me to designate IP addresses and bandwidth and do all sorts of cool stuff, more things than you would necessarily do with your bog standard household router. Once you've done that, the next thing that you need to do is find a place to put your base station.
So to become an ISP, you need two things. You need a connection to the internet, and you see that receiver there, that's a Motorola canopy receiver, which is pointed just off in the distance there. You probably can't see it, is a large mast. That provides us 10 megs of bandwidth, and then that goes inside this building, which I'll show you in a moment, and it's all configured so that it's then pushed out on those 2 nanostations at top. Now the plan is to add more nanostations, but at the moment those nanostations service all the residential properties over there and all the residential properties over there. There's about 100 properties on this site.
So the MikroTik router board that we were talking about earlier is set up inside that building. It's connected to a UPS to keep stable, and then some PoE injectors will run the power up to those nanos. Also, the canopy receiver from our I.S.P goes into that router board, which then distributes the internet. Now, the router board isn't too difficult to configure. Once you've configured it, it will enable you to send certain amounts of bandwidth to certain homes. On each router board you set up something called a queue, and each home has an IP address. I've also set up a shared plan queue as well. So some people on this list will have a shared amount of bandwidth over a number of homes, and some people on this list have decided to rent a specific amount of bandwidth, and that is designated just for them.
It's Joseph, say hello.
Hi.
Joseph, which company do you work for?
Access Kenya.
And see, this is how you put internet into a house. You get someone amazing like Joseph,
Yeah.
to rent you a load of bandwidth.
Yeah.
How does the internet get here?
Through point to point.
Okay, is that a Motorola canopy?
Yeah, it's a Motorola.
Yeah, and then what you do is you have friends like
Kenneth
Ken up there
and Alan.
and Alan.
Yep.
Wave, Alan. And then they put these devices called nanos on everyone's roof.
Yeah.
That connects to a base station that we've created.
Yeah.
Now I'm fortunate I have this big water tower, and then I added a old pole that I found in my garden, and on top you can see the nano station. That's directed towards the repeater station that I've created, and these are great. They work on near line of sight, so if you can see, it's sort of aimed out that way. You can see, you can't see the repeater station, but the repeater station is just the other side of that house.
So let's use my home as an example, and here you can see a TP-Link load balancing router which has been manually configured to the IP address that I had given this home through the router board back up at the base station. Now this device is connected to the Nano and the Nano is connected to the base station, but it also connects a whole load of devices. Here you can see an airport giving my home wireless network, you can see a network storage device, but through that one PoE injector is connected to that Nano, and that Nano enables me to get access to that internet brought in by Access Kenya. So once you've set up your infrastructure, it's important that you manage the network correctly, because you'll have customers now, and those customers will have expectations. So here are some very quick steps on what you need to do to manage your infrastructure. So the first thing you're going to need to think about is how this network is going to pay for itself. You're going to need to work out your pricing, and you're also going to need to work out how you're going to get that money reimbursed back to you by your subscribers. So you need to think carefully about your billing. You need to think carefully about the price that you set your service. And I have two options on my network: a shared plan, which people subscribe to a shared amount of bandwidth, and then people can also subscribe to a fixed bandwidth, which is a slightly more expensive product. You're going to need to think about network maintenance, and I have set up my costings in a way that this network is a not-for-profit. So it's not making money, but it makes just enough money to pay for any equipment failure or maintenance, or bringing specialist people in to rewire something, so that the network can continue keeping people happy. You need to make sure that as soon as you add more and more homes, the demand for technical support will also increase. And you need to think about how you deliver that too. I have 15 customers, and those 15 customers are pretty easy to manage and help out when needed. You need to think about how to manage your customers' expectations. And my service provider is pretty good and reliable. However, in rural Africa, there are power outages, there are fiber cuts, there are all sorts of things that take place that degrade and sometimes even cut the network off from internet. I'm thinking about redundancy, but you need to make sure that your customers are made aware of the situation. And I will often email or phone just to explain to them where the network is at and why perhaps it isn't performing to the standard that they require. But managing people's expectations can be quite difficult sometimes, and you need to be able to have a good care for customer services so that people remain subscribed to your network. So the last thing that you might want to think about is expansion. And as my network is becoming more and more popular, I need to think about the bandwidth requirements that I have. Do I need to rent more bandwidth? Is my equipment up to servicing more people? I've even got more people being interested up to 15k away from the original base station, which might require me to buy more expensive equipment. So when you're thinking about expansion, make sure that you are capable of delivering the services that your first customer has experienced, that even the new customers come on board will experience that same level of service. So that's my simple tutorial on how to become an internet service provider. And no, you're not going to become a huge multinational company. In my case, I service half a dozen homes. But it's something that you might like to think about if you are in a similar situation to me. If you've enjoyed this, please rate and subscribe and comment. Perhaps you've got some thoughts and suggestions on how I might be able to improve the quality of service, or you might even want to share of your own experience. You might have created your own ISP. Please do get in touch and let us know. So thank you for watching. Thank you for doing all of the things that YouTubers do. And as always, have one on me.